Hey, thanks for tuning in to What's Your Signal, where we explore the latest trends in digital transformation, network connectivity, and security. As always, you're joined by me, Taylor Walker, and my co host, Mauricio Steffen. Hello, Mauricio.
Hi, Taylor. How's it going today?
It's really going well. It's going well. Um, I was going to tell you that I was writing a blog recently, which is what I spend a lot of my time doing. And it was about IoT. And I found something interesting that I wanted to share with you because you are kind of nerdy. But first, I want to make you guess what is considered to be the world's first IoT device. What do you think it was?
I don't know. I would think it'd have to be something simple like a light switch or something along those lines.
I like where your head's at, but it was a Coke machine.
Really? A Coke machine?
A Coke machine. It is widely considered to be the world's first IoT device. So in the 80s, there was this graduate student from Carnegie Mellon, and he basically had an office that was a long way from the building's Coke machine. So he was tired of making the trek to the Coke machine just to find out that it was empty or that the Coke was warm because they had just restocked it. So he came up with this idea to basically track the machine's contents remotely. So to pull data from the machine, they basically installed a board that sensed the status of the inventory indicator lights, those little lights on the old Coke machines. And then there was a line that ran from the board to a gateway for the department's main computer, which was connected to a packet-switched computer network, which you remember. I'm sure you grew up on those. You're very familiar with those. And anyone connected to that network could then see, A, if there were any Cokes in the machine, and if so, which ones were cold. It's pretty fancy.
That's a pretty interesting way to solve a problem. I mean, I know that I don't want to walk to the coffee machine or the soda machine when it's out or just been refilled. That awkward walk away when the guy's stuffing stuff in the machine, and you're just like, I'll come back.
Yeah, I barely want to walk from my desk to the water fountain, so I'm with you. And thinking about this, it's almost unfathomable to consider how far IoT has come since then. And as 2023 comes to a close, what I was hoping we could do today is really find out what's on the horizon for enterprise IoT in 2024. So here to help us do that is the president of Epic IO, Mario Campos, along with Cradlepoint lead product manager, Colin Geis. Okay, so let's start with a recap of what we've seen up to this point in IoT. So I'd like to ask, how do you guys feel the landscape of IoT has evolved over the last year, especially considering advancements in technology that have been made? Colin, let's start with you.
Well, I think as I look across multiple industries, kind of with a cellular as a focus, that simplification of both deployment and management is a really key driver for people, and kind of adding onto that is security. Security is becoming it's always been kind of notable and talked about in IoT, but I think more moving now into the future, it's really starting to get this strong push of of IT's involvement to simplify security in all things IoT as it goes out to the field as well. I think it's been talked about, and now we're starting to get traction because it's becoming easier and because it's being more holistically built into products. So those are a couple kind of topics that I'm seeing right now.
Absolutely. So I'll pitch in. So from my side, I think it's been really exciting to see the advancements. I feel that 5G in particular is really enabling us to make this mainstream when it comes to IoT and AI. And we're starting to see we're getting past the innovators when it comes to like the client base and starting to see more of the early majority. And I love a book. It's one of my favorite business books, Crossing the Chasm by Jeffrey Moore. And he talks about those gaps in between different categories of clients. And so in the case of business, especially in technology, we end up building our business initially around innovators, right? So we have a clientele, usually in enterprise or even government, that really focus on innovation, right? And so there's definitely that ability to build up on that. And now with 5G in particular, we're starting to see more of the early majority now taking on, right? And so we see clients, especially in the enterprise and government, and I'll be touching on government quite a bit. It's one of my favorite topics, where we're starting to see cities and counties leveraging 5G IoT and AI to bring those solutions to market. And so I think it's been really exciting.
Up to 2023, I guess like up to today, are there any specific industries or sectors that you feel have embraced IoT more than others, and have they seen benefits from doing that?
So up until now, especially let's start, let's say, in government, we've done some big projects around water management, for example, electric grid management. When we look at examples, for example, the meter at your home, that's been an IoT use case for a long, long time, right? Before, there used to be trucks out there driving around reading meters, and so those are what I would consider low-hanging fruit for IoT. And there's definitely a lot of cities that have been leveraging that, but with limited abilities, right? The network perhaps wasn't able to support the number of devices that were coming on. And so they were leveraging technologies like LoRa, for example, or LoRaWAN. That's a technology that was designed initially for that type of scenario. And so now with cellular technology really driving a lot of those use cases, things like CAT-M, or more of a mobility type resource in the case of communication. Now we're starting to see the majority of those cities and counties leveraging that technology. Same with enterprise. We see cases where, for example, in AI tends to drive a lot of our use cases in enterprise, and of course IoT. I consider AI and video cameras more of a video as a sensor type scenario, right? And so in the case of enterprise, we have agencies or customers that are using AI and IoT to understand gauges, for example, at a plant. And so we've delivered projects where we install cameras, and what we're doing is we're understanding gauges that are sending different readings, and so that information is being incorporated into the platform. We bring it in, we convert it into an IoT value, and then from there we drive some type of insight, right? Or we drive an outcome around that. And so again, I think it's just we're starting to see a big explosion right now of those use cases.
If I might add to that, I think the question was, are there specific industries or sectors that are adopting IoT more? The industries that I'm seeing that are adopting it, IoT, are the industries that have had to, right? And a great use case is, a municipality or a city that has 100,000 or 1,000,000 meters, right? It takes quite a workforce to go out and read every one of those meters. As you go more into the industrial side of things, like oil and gas or water, wastewater, the number of reporting sites or extraction sites, or the miles and miles of pipeline or electrical distribution, whatever, right? IoT has enabled the ability to monitor more and more points along all of that distribution or across that network that people just couldn't have before. And so it's really transformed many industries, both governmental and private utilities, to be able to manage their business much more effectively. I can't claim ownership of this, but 100 years ago or even 20 years ago, utilities were operating their business like driving down the freeway with your eyes closed for a mile at a time. Your eyes are closed because you don't know what's happening. You can open your eyes once a month to see what all the data was, right? And now they're able to operate continuously with their eyes open because they're getting such a continuous flow of information. So it's been really transformative to a variety of different industries.
Absolutely. A great use case I'd love to share with you. Last year, we did a project with a cement manufacturing company, one of the largest in the world. And this project was done overseas. And what was very unique about that project is we went into one of their plants in Mexico, and we deployed our solution, and we definitely leveraged Cradlepoint as part of that, just because there was a lot of communication limitations around being able to get that data out of that plant. And so cellular definitely made it that much easier. And in that case, they had been running that plant with the same sensors for 20 years. And these are sensors that after installing our platform, we realized that they're producing about 1.5 gigabytes of data a day. And they had never collected that data. All they used it for was more of an analog use case. The process of making the cement, bagging it. There was a lot of sensors to stop the production line, to turn on lights if it runs out of bags for the bagging of the cement. And so all this data had been thrown off for almost 20 years. And without any changes to the plant without integrating any type of new sensors, we were able to bring our platform in, get the communication set up. Within 3 days, we were done with the integration. And so now we're extracting that data and creating insights around that. And the company was very concerned because their plant was designed to process about 10,000 bags of cement a day. And at best, they would see 2,500, 2,800 sometimes. And so they were really wondering why. And they had the data in their hands, and they had never been able to take advantage of that. And so, we were able to integrate our platform, get those sensors to produce really insightful data. And what we did is we complemented with additional new sensors like air quality monitoring. And so now they're able to measure the particular matter, basically dust that's flowing in the air, more from an employee safety concern. But this just goes to show that the use cases are there, the data is being produced, and they're out there. It's just a matter of being able to work with the right customers and integrate the right platform to collect that data.
I think that's a really interesting point, Mario, is that, as we talk to customers, they have a system, they have a process that's already running, right? And they're generating output. What they possibly are missing is all the golden nuggets that are in the data that they're discarding, because their focus has always been on manufacturing widgets, manufacturing cement, right? If we go back and look at a really simple example of just a Coke machine, right? Yes, you put in money and you collect a Coke and somebody refills it, periodically. But if you can start figuring out what your high points or what your, frequently used times of machine are, that you can start timing that with when it gets refilled, so that in your peak time of the day, it always has stock, right? So you're loading it in a non-peak time to maximize your output. Like, that is a super simple example of the metadata behind, or the data behind, and how it can transform your business. So
absolutely.
So you guys have brought up, a couple of use cases that it seems like the early adopters are adopting IoT basically with the idea of cost savings or efficiency. So is that really kind of accurate, as far as the early adopters go, where it's not about new applications, it's more about, places like you mentioned, like the meter monitoring, right? Like, I'm old enough to remember the days where the meter maid came around and looked at, took the manual reading of your power meter or your water meter and took that back and made the calculation and did the bill. And that was all a month behind because it took so long to do that. And Colin, you mentioned, right, is like the scale that people need, or the amount of people that they have to hire in order to do that becomes untenable at a certain point. So are those the things that are really driving IoT adoption here, kind of with those early adopters, or is there more behind those use cases, or are they starting there and learning more, I guess is what I'm trying to ask.
I guess I would respond to, I think there's an idealization, or, the ideal outcome is that you both improve performance, you reduce cost, you gain efficiency. I think that's the Valhalla. That's the everyone wins. But I think in reality, cost reduction may not be really the initial benefit of it. It's really trying to get more efficiency with what you have is probably where it starts, because it does take an investment, right? And there is a return on investment, and it takes time. And the more you're willing to invest, the more you're willing to really challenge your existing processes, you can lead to reduced costs. But that takes a transformative approach to business. So I'd probably, in my experience, and I'm sure Mario's is different, but in my experience, I think it's more just trying to do more with what you have today, right? That's the least impactful to a business. Step 2 might be transformational in trying to strip cost and reduce cost. But
yeah, absolutely, I agree with Colin 100%. I would put it as doing more with less, right? Or doing more with what you already have. And in the case of the cement manufacturing plant that I mentioned, what's important to recognize is that the business leaders at that company, they're creating business projections around the idea that in that specific plant, they're producing 10,000 bags of cement a day. And so that is the expectation, right? And so when they realize that those numbers are skewed, it's really important to go back and try to understand what's going on in what's driving a lot of those deficiencies, and we do that through IoT. I like to always mention the big transformation that I think humanity is going through right now, and it's called Industry 4.0, or the fourth industrial revolution. And that's something that I think we're very lucky to be in that specific time of humanity. I tell this to my teenagers at home that as humans, we've seen multiple industrial revolutions in the past, going back more than 100 years, and we're going through the fourth right now. And that's truly around being able to transform the business to understand what the machines are doing, right? And so going back to Colin's comment of doing more with less, that transformation is there, right? And we're using technology to do that. And we're lucky to have access to systems in the cloud, for example, where we can bring that data back and now correlate it, right? So we understand why a plant is producing a certain number of widgets versus another based on additional factors that we may not be recognizing. And we do that definitely through IoT sensors. And there's a lot of AI behind it to actually drive those insights and create those outcomes. And, as a company, we focus, and we've been doing this for more than 20 years, focusing on an area of technology called AIoT. And that's basically the combination of AI and IoT. And that truly is the driving factor behind being able to understand what the data is coming from, what's happening in the field, and creating those insights and driving those outcomes around that.
Mario, when you say the key is being able to do more with less, I'm just picturing how much space that frees up, both mentally for the people that are in these companies and, sometimes even physically, like on their operational floors, and how much space that creates for innovation. And it kind of acts as like a springboard for them to be able to move into the next generation of their industry. And I'm curious what you both think. What are those big leaps that we are going to see in the next year, or those things that are on the frontier? The AIoT is, I'm sure, a huge one. I'd love to hear more about that. And then also, what else do you guys think is on the horizon for us?
Absolutely. From my side, what we've seen is definitely that transformation around Industry 4.0. And, I think a lot of it has to do also with the idea that we're being transformed as humans into a new type of way of doing business and expectations that we have from our workplace, for example. And so I'll share another example of a project that we delivered around car manufacturing. And this was overseas as well. In that case, there's a mandate, specifically in Mexico, where the government is mandating the improvement of work safety and working conditions, right, for their labor force. And so one of those factors was air quality. And there's actually a mandate from the government to require car manufacturing plants to measure air quality within the plant. And if it reaches a certain level, they need to stop production and make changes around the production line. And so in that case, we were able to deliver sensors that measure what's called PM, or particular matter 1, 2.5, and PM10. And those are different factors of a dust particle versus another type of particle that's flowing in the air. And so in that case, we're basically driving signage that's letting the employees know what the current air quality is in that plant. And there's definitely a big driving force from the leaders at that company to make sure that their labor force is staying safe and that people are happy, they're coming to work every day, and they're keeping down their competition, right? There's definitely a very competitive market today. And so these are the small changes that leaders are making in their businesses that really have a very transformative result at the end of the day. And it shows in their numbers. I saw this particular quarter for the S&P 500, 71% of the companies in S&P 500 on their earnings call mentioned the word AI or IoT. And I was reading the article that out of that percentage, the 70% of those companies saw an increase in their stock price of 11% within 3 or 4 days of mentioning that. And so it's real. And the companies that didn't mention it, they didn't mention the magic words, did not see that increase. They saw a much less increase on their stock price. And so we can definitely see how it's impacting at a real level for our businesses.
What's the difference? This is just more of a clarifying question for me. What's the difference in an IoT solution and an IoT solution that's complemented by AI? Like, how do those work differently? Like, can you have a successful IoT solution and reap the benefits of it without AI, or is that kind of not even a thing going into 2024? Is it you're always going to have both?
So yeah, from my side, so IoT is definitely our ability to collect data from the field, right? And so there's some big concepts around business in general. There's the concept of SCADA, right, or automation around a plant or some type of environment that requires automation of some sort. And so in the case of IoT, some people tend to confuse SCADA and IoT. IoT is here to give us a layer of information that's collecting data from either existing sensors or sensors that are being integrated, right? And so that's the concept of IoT. And we're not here to replace SCADA. So the SCADA systems are there, and they'll continue to be there because they need to handle that day-to-day automation, right? Opening gates, closing doors, and so on. Now, IoT is really here to collect that data, bring it in, and give us those insights. And so I'll share a project, and I keep sharing projects, but I just love going
We
back
love
to
examples.
existing accounts, right? Existing customers. We love helping them. There's one of the largest water agencies in California, and we all know California has struggled with droughts and just the lack of water resources in general. And so we started working with them about 6 years ago. And what we did is they already had sensors deployed throughout the entire water infrastructure. And we're talking about almost 200 miles of water canals going up and down the state. And what they're doing is they're serving water to either cities, other irrigation districts, and basically large agencies that benefit right from that canal. And so what we did is, first of all, we went in, we installed our platform, we deployed a cradle point. Again, these are remote sites that are very difficult to get to. And so cellular is truly the only communication avenue. And I'll share just a funny story around that. Before we brought our system there, they had a private radio that they were using to communicate back to their agency. So they were using an 800 megahertz radio. And in the 20 years that they had been operating that network, they had never experienced 100% uptime until we came in with our products, with Cradle Point, and just the reliability of what we do. And so we started collecting sensor data, bringing it in. To me, going back to your question, that is the IoT layer, just collecting the data, right? And bringing it in and understanding what's happening, water levels, water flow, and so on. Then we went on to develop a platform to do water prediction and the usage of water. And so now they're able to predict water usage and water consumption. And what we did is we went back to the federal government and we requested about 30 years worth of data that they were able to provide of water consumption and water flow. We plugged that into the AI model. And so now we're able to predict water usage and water consumption. And what the agency is doing is now they're using those numbers to go back and negotiate contracts with the different water sources, dams, and so on, knowing what the water usage and water consumption is going to look like for the next 12 months. And so that has a huge impact in their business. We're able to conserve water, and it's a benefit for the entire population there.
One of the things I know that I've just seen in articles, and I think I maybe see people inflating this a lot because it is a huge concern, but security concerns have been a significant issue in IoT adoption. And I'm curious what you guys feel the security themes might be that we expect to see in 2024 or that have even started gaining momentum now to kind of address those concerns.
So I think that we're going to start seeing, if not already, convergence between AI, IoT, and security. So I don't know if that was planned, Taylor, but that was a pretty good flow. But I think what we're going to start seeing is, and kind of going back to trends in general, where do we think it's going? I think this whole concept of cloud-based and big data-based for IoT is going to start being anonymously, not commoditized, but used as a community infrastructure or community data set to better understand, what is real and what's not real. Like what is valid traffic and what's not valid traffic. Completely anonymized. So Mario's traffic is different than my traffic, which is different than, but at a higher layer or a lower layer, being able to map and analyze that type of data. So I think in terms of IoT is all about scale. It's all about mass deployment and low touch. And the more easy that we as companies can get product to market and make it easy to be secure, to reduce attack surfaces, to understand who good and bad actors may be, or what good or bad traffic is. I think that's a really easy area. I say easy. I think that would be a novel area for AI to have significant impact, for IoT.
So I want to kind of expand on that question a little bit, right? People typically talk about security and IoT as relates to things that have been in the news, right? Because you think about that Target breach a few years ago, and that came in on a HVAC IoT system. And I think there was a casino breach a few years ago, not this most recent one, but one that came in through a fish tank monitoring system. And so security is usually talked about in those terms. What do you guys think are the privacy implications around IoT and what that will look like in the future, especially as people get more educated and more concerned about how their data is used?
So privacy is definitely a big concern. And what we're seeing is the ability for our AI platforms to anonymize a lot of this data, right? And it starts off with sensor information that's coming in. And when the projects, at least that I get involved in, that our company that usually delivers, they tend to be enterprise kind of government-sized projects that are quite large, and so there's our need is to maintain privacy at a much larger scale, right? And so definitely goes hand in hand with security and being able to secure those systems. And what we're taking into account are, and going back to Colin's comment of those layers of security that we're adding to IoT and AI. There's a new concept around IoT that's basically following the same footsteps of zero trust, where you can actually add a layer of software and AI to analyze the data that's coming in from those sensors, right? And so you may have a sensor, water temperature, water level for a tank that's reporting the same signature every day, all day. And so what these platforms are doing is they're basically looking at the data that's coming in and understanding that there may be a pattern that changed, right? And so a sensor that used to report twice a day, a certain number of kilobits, and now all of a sudden it's reporting a much larger communication scale and it's sending more data, may be a problem, right? It may be compromised. And so that allows AI to really intervene and help us address those security concerns, privacy concerns at the IoT and AI layer, which we truly all need.
I think privacy is critically important, but I think that it's a double-edged sword. I think you can have privacy, but I think you need to trust in the companies that you're doing business with as well. And they need to be transparent in how they're handling your data or what it's being used for. I think knowing where your data is being sent, just because I buy an IoT device off the internet, do I know where my data is going, or do I know, what direction data is flowing to or from that device? I think it's easy to buy IoT equipment. I think it's hard to secure IoT equipment because security has always been secondary, right? And I think that mindset has got to change, and I think it's got to start from us manufacturers and companies that are designing and deploying IoT. Customers are, applications are always price sensitive. I don't care who it is. Everybody's worried about price, right? And security can't be a barrier to that. Privacy can't be a barrier to that. So I think, we as an industry have an obligation to, make our product secure, to be transparent of where a customer's data is going. Is it domestic? Is it international? So again, I come back to, trust and transparency as being fundamental. Data privacy is nothing new, right? If it's a state, if it's a country that has, data retention or, bound where data can go or not go, that's coming, and it's going to become more finite, as we move forward. But I think trusting your vendor is a pretty huge first step.
So before we start kind of winding down the conversation, I wanted to ask, are there any other trends in IoT or advancements that you guys haven't had a chance to share during this conversation yet that you think are particularly exciting, or even ones we might already be getting into that are gaining speed?
Yeah, I definitely have one. Something that I've personally been working on for the last couple of years, and that's biosecurity. And so biosecurity is a concept around being able to utilize AI and IoT to create an outcome around being able to secure our biological environment, right? And so we actually, after the 2 years of development, we started marketing a new product. It's called Aura, and that's centered around biosecurity. And so that's a small device. It has a cradle point embedded because it definitely needs that wireless communication and to be deployed quickly at a site. And what it does is it uses an electrical process to break down the oxygen that's breathing in. And basically, what it does is it breaks, as we all understand, oxygen is O2, right? Two molecules of oxygen. With the right voltage applied, it breaks down those two molecules. And when they come out the other end of that machine, and we're talking a machine the size of a laptop that gets installed on a wall, what it does is that oxygen, the free molecules, bind into triplets. And so they bind into three molecules for about 30 minutes, forming ozone. And that ozone becomes a very highly effective disinfectant. And what it does is we're deploying it in areas like cold storage facilities. And what it does is it neutralizes salmonella, it neutralizes listeria. We're using it in hotels, for example. And so in the hospitality space, they're using it. And we have one particular customer that's quite large, and they've implemented auras in their cold storage facilities at the all-inclusive resorts. And so what it does is we've seen parsley, for example, or cheese lasting 2 or 3 times as long as they would normally last in that same cold storage facility, just because we're able to neutralize those pathogens that are sitting on those surfaces. We're seeing it being applied to hatcheries, for example, in the case of eggs. And so same concept, we're actually able to penetrate the eggshell and neutralize salmonella inside the embryo. So now we have an egg that's being neutralized, it's clean. And so we're seeing those chicks, when they go back to the broiler farm, they're eating more, they're healthier, they put out more weight. And so it truly becomes a huge benefit to the business, all done through biosecurity. And we're doing a great job applying IoT and AI to that space. And it's been really exciting. We have a lot of new customers jumping on board on biosecurity, and it's been really gratifying.
You know, some of these examples that you guys have shared, I'm curious, do you feel like the adoption of IoT and AI is really meant for bigger businesses or meant for larger industries, or are you seeing an uptick in maybe some of these smaller players that can take advantage of the technology?
IoT, AIoT, secure AIoT, security IoT. It's literally for everyone. All it takes is a first step, right? It has to you have to have the will or the passion for evolution, and that's really been what's exciting to me about IoT. I've been in it for a decade and a half now. Is just the various applications that I see. Mario's had a dozen examples. There's 1,000 out there. There's a million different applications, and every one is exciting because it took a company or a partner to be excited and see that novelty, see that golden nugget in the data, or see that business transformation. So no, it's not for the big guys. It's not for the small guys. It's for everybody. It just takes passion to drive that change.
And for those of you that can't see Colin right now, he's actually wearing a hat that says IoT is for everyone, which is very...
I wear my vest proudly.
That's great. Great comment from Colin. I just want to add that in the past, I think all these technologies, IoT, AI, they've been a little bit cost prohibitive to some extent. And when we're talking about the small guy, right, it's hard to be able to bring in this type of technology and be able to afford a larger deployment within the business, perhaps. And that's usually the case with the innovators, right? Going back to my initial example, innovators help entrepreneurs build businesses, right? That they end up being the customer base that helps us bring our business forward. when it comes to technology. But as it becomes widely accepted and proliferates through the business, we're able to bring those prices down, and the cost becomes more accessible. And so now we see the majority of the clientele being able to have access to technology, and that's really exciting for all of us, because it truly becomes a group effort, right, to bring this forward and to have everybody benefit from it.
So I think, as like Taylor said, as we wrap up, I think I maybe put you guys on the spot a little bit here and ask you to put your prognostication hats on a little bit, and maybe think about what is the thing that IoT, maybe there's not an IoT thing today. Like Mario, the thing that you guys mentioned around the ozone is definitely really innovative. What is like one of those things that you guys think that IoT can't address today that will address in the future?
I'm wearing my protagonist hat because I don't believe it exists today, but I'm an optimist at heart, and so I believe it will exist. I think one of the trends that we're seeing is this idea of edge compute, right? But processing consistently flows from centralized to decentralized to central. It's constantly this ebb and flow of where their value is. I think pretty quickly here, we're going to find this really novel playground of kind of variable edge to cloud processing. And I think that concept is coming. We have hybrid clouds, we have edge processing, and but I think it's the ability for organizations to offload processing power in a dynamic way, that where there's resources, it can be leveraged, right, in a very dynamic way. And I think today, using different container or Docker capabilities or edge processing, like, it's such a structured environment today. But I think that environment is coming, and as we can start leveraging all the compute power that's out there, I think it's going to be really interesting for organizations to be able to leverage and deploy more applications very seamlessly. I don't think we're anywhere close right now, but that would be my optimist hat.
Absolutely. And just following on that, I think edge computing is definitely allowing us to do that. I'd say, in our business, we started more than 20 years ago, and some of the initial systems we deployed were behind a 2G connection. And so when we did AI, we try to do a lot of the analysis at the edge of the network in an enclosure where we could pack, compute power, and we would be lucky to send an image across a 2G connection, right? And that has evolved, and now we see 5G really becoming the standard. And so what we're able to do, as Colin mentioned, is offload a lot of that work, the processing power, out to the edge. And with concepts like private cellular network, for example, we're allowing customers to now deploy a very unique infrastructure where they can onboard sensors, onboard AI functionality at the edge, and be able to make those decisions. I'm always amazed when I see those documentaries on remote surgeries, for example, being able to conduct a surgery across a 5G connection and having the ability and the precision to carry that on. And that's thanks to 5G, to private cellular network, and just the concepts that are allowing to bring that power out to the edge of the network. And that's definitely a truly fascinating area of the business that I'm excited to see.
I love that. I think we could speculate about the future for a long time, and it is fun to see some of those things coming to fruition now. But we have taken a lot of your time already, and I know your guys' schedules are packed. So before we end, Mario, where can our listeners find more information about Epic.io?
You can always find us on our website at epicio.com. We're also part of most social networks. And you can always email me as well. We're always here to help. I usually tend to be very involved in most projects. I love technology and love the design process. But overall, we have regional sales directors throughout the U.S. that are more than willing to help. And, we're truly here to make a difference for our customers. And we've been able to do that for more than 24 years. And I hope to be here for another 24 years. So really excited to be here.
Your passion exudes through the screen. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Talking to these two, I do have something that kept coming to mind. So I don't know if I've told you this before, but I worked at AT&T for like a decade. And I remember this period when I worked at AT&T where we would all just be walking around going, what would happen if you stick a SIM in it? Like if you put a SIM card in a pill bottle, how does that change how the pill bottle functions? Or if you put it in a dog collar, like how does that change? And thinking back, those things seem so elementary. And to now think how all these connected devices give us so much information and you can see so much and learn so much from anywhere, it's just so cool to see how quickly that transition's been made, but also knowing going into 2024, we're probably still just scratching the surface of what can be done.
Yeah, I think we're totally scratching the surface, right? Because, there's a mantra out there, and I don't know who to credit it to, but everything that can be connected will be connected eventually, right? I can't even remember what the statistic is, and it may be old at this point, but there used to be like a statistic where there was like 3 connected devices for every person on the planet, right? And that's just going to grow over time because, you think about it, and the funny thing is, Colin said IoT is for everyone, right? And it's absolutely correct because it doesn't have to be some big, huge, grand like plant efficiency kind of thing to embrace IoT. Even, mom and pa's pizza shop can, make things more efficient. Like, I think everybody has done a stint in fast food or the food service industry. And one of the things that I remember is just having to temp check the line, right? Cold food has to stay cold, hot food has to stay hot. And that's usually a manual process of someone walking around with a thermometer, one of those, no touch ones, temping the line and logging those. Why not have a sensor that does that for you? So when it's time to do your health inspection, all you have to do is just print out the records of here's the temperature of the line over time. There you go. Makes it more efficient.
Yeah.
Have less dedicate resources to that. Inventory management is another one, small businesses can take care of. Colin mentioned that with the vending machine, but just scale that up for restaurants who get regular food deliveries, like from food service companies like Cisco and American Foods and others. Why not, instead of having to do inventory and then send that order off, automate that, right? Through shelf scanning or whatever,
Yeah.
Scanning things in, scanning things out as they're being used. And then that data is automatically transmitted to your vendor who automatically, orders you the things that you need, more flour or more milk or more the staples, right? Obviously, it can't do everything for you because, I don't want people listening to this worried that AI is getting ready to take their jobs because there's always those one-off things that you'll need to do. And things will need to be validated by humans almost all the time. But, as a regular thing, businesses of all sizes can take advantage of the efficiencies that IoT can give you. You just have to, be able to embrace those things. And I know that for small businesses, I'm talking a lot about small businesses, it's difficult because, those people are typically wearing multiple hats, right? So, mom and pa's pizza shop, small, locally owned business, they're not really IoT savvy. Their job is making pizzas, not admitting networks or implementing IoT systems. But that lack of knowledge shouldn't deter people from that. They should engage with different vendors and different partners to look at what makes sense for their business in order to help them be more efficient and ultimately do the thing that they got into business for, which is serve their customers.
Yeah.
As opposed to, all of these manual tasks that can be automated through IoT.
It seems like IoT is really a way that could level the playing field for a lot of these businesses and industries. I think that's really interesting. Well, listeners, look down at your podcast app and hit subscribe on the What's Your Signal page because we want to keep giving you insights about connecting people, places, and things from anywhere. And if you'd like to learn more about the future of enterprise IoT, visit cradlepoint.com.